I'm going to work problem number 90 in section 6.5, page 526. We're going to write this expression, cosine of arctan plus arctan as an algebraic expression in u and v. So we're going to make substitutions, alpha equals arctan and beta equals arctan and then we'll be looking at something like cosine of alpha plus beta, and then we will later on in the problem use the cosine addition rule. So we're going to have alpha equals arctan so that means tan alpha equals u. Now back to the Pythagorean identities on page 425. This basic one, sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. That's just a Pythagorean theorem because the hypotenuse has length 1. And then when we divide by sine or cosine, we get these two sister identities right here. We're going to use this middle one for tan squared. So here's the Pythagorean identity with tangent, and then that will mean 1 plus u squared, right, because tan alpha is u, equals secant squared alpha, which is 1 over cosine squared alpha. So now solving this equation for cosine of alpha, we're going to get that cosine of alpha is 1 over the square root of 1 plus u squared. I hope you follow my algebra steps there. I'm just taking this equation above and inverting it to get cosine squared alpha is 1 over that, and then I take the square root. Now since cosine squared alpha plus sine squared alpha equals 1, a basic Pythagorean identity, I can figure out sine squared alpha. So sine squared alpha is 1 minus cosine squared alpha. But, cosine squared alpha is 1 over 1 plus u squared. Making a common denominator, we end up with this right here for sine squared alpha. Taking the square root to get sine alpha, we have sine alpha. Now remember that we already knew cosine alpha, so I'm going to summarize those two right here. Okay, so now we have cosine alpha and sine alpha in terms of the variable u. Now let's go back to the issue with beta. So we're going to have beta equals arctan v. So if beta equals arctan v, it's the same as all this. We're just substituting alpha with beta and u with v. So cosine of beta is going to be the same thing except a v. Sine of beta is going to be the same thing except with a u, and I got to change that guy to a u. Change it to a v, and so there we are. So where were we? We're trying to find the cosine of arctan u plus arctan v. We made the substitutions. Arctan u equals alpha, etc. We figured out the cosine sine of alpha and beta. Now to the later part of the problem that I mentioned earlier, we're going to use the addition rule for the cosine. Cosine of alpha plus beta is this thing right here. Right? It's got the minus sign because this is the one that's kind of flipped. And now we make the substitutions. Cosine of alpha is this thing here, and cosine of beta is that, etc. So making the substitutions, cosine alpha, cosine beta, so our denominators, square root of 1 plus u squared, the square root of 1 plus v squared. And then the same situation for the denominators over here. And then for the numerators, we have 1 times 1. And for over here, we have u times v. Because these two things have the same denominator, common denominator, we can combine them into one single fraction. So that's the end of the problem, I guess. Can't simplify it anymore.